Coming up in our newscast tonight. High levels of fine dust are choking many regions in the nation, including the capital. Since Sunday, the situation has called for the government to apply emergency measures for 3 straight days for the first time this year. Top military officials from South Korea and Japan sit down for talks in Singapore. A working-level meeting is set up to clear misunderstandings over a recent disputed encounter between their militaries in the East Sea. South Korea's population stands at 50 million, with an average age exceeding 42 for the first time since the annual report was first published in 2008. It also marks the lowest percentage increase up to date. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. Here in Seoul and just about every other part of the nation, we are covered in thick haze. Fine dust is a health risk, so the government has taken emergency measures to reduce it. They include restrictions on driving. Hong Yu starts us off with the appalling level of air pollution today.
Covering their noses and mouths with masks, people try to protect themselves on the morning commute as the average fine dust density exceeded 134 micrograms per cubic meter in Seoul.
Everyone knows how harmful fine dust is, so people wear masks. But it's really uncomfortable wearing this. And this is not cheap, so think about having to buy this every time.
Starting Sunday, the government's taken emergency measures to reduce the fine dust. Those were still in place on Monday, and now the government's announced they'll be applied on Tuesday as well, the first time they've ever been applied 3 days in a row. The measures include closing parking lots at public offices and prohibiting the use of diesel cars made before 2005, and an alternate day no driving system. These measures are applied when the average fine dust density per cubic meter is above 50 micrograms.
Dense fine dust settled over the country due to fine dust arriving from China, plus fine dust produced within South Korea that stagnated for a long period of time due to high atmospheric pressure.
55 businesses that have made a voluntary agreement with the Environment Ministry will prioritize the use of eco-friendly fuels and make improvements in emissions efficiency while the emergency fine dust reduction measures are in effect. Seoul Metropolitan Government and the Environment Ministry advises people to avoid outdoor activities and to wear masks when going outside. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, military and ministerial officials of Seoul and Tokyo are holding working-level talks in Singapore. The meeting is set up to try and discuss a disputed encounter between a South Korean warship and a Japanese military surveillance plane. However, according to our Park Ji-won, the two sides have not reached an agreement as of now.
According to South Korea's Defense Ministry Monday, high-ranking military and ministerial officials are taking part in the talks in Singapore. The talks are led by South Korea's Chief Director of Military Support under the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vice Admiral Boo Seok-jong, and his counterpart from Japan's Defense Ministry, Takeshi Ishikawa. A military source told Arirang News Monday afternoon that the talks in the morning were held at the South Korean Embassy in Singapore, and the afternoon session was held at the Japanese Embassy to create a fair atmosphere for the discussions. However, another military source also told Arirang News Monday evening that as of early Monday evening, the two sides had come no closer together, nor had they reached an agreement. According to the sources, the exact agenda won't be released until the Defense Ministry officially announces the results of the talks. This is the second time that South Korea and Japan have met to discuss the radar issue. The previous working-level talks between the two countries were held on December 27th as a video conference. On December 20th, a Japanese patrol aircraft claimed that it was targeted by a South Korean destroyer when the ship was on a humanitarian mission to rescue a distressed North Korean vessel in international waters in the East Sea. South Korea's defense ministry has denied the claim, saying its warship did not use its STOR-180 fire control radar during the operation and only used its MWO-8 search radar and an optical camera to observe the Japanese aircraft, as its rescue mission was hindered by the Japanese plane flying at low altitude in a way that could be seen as threatening. Seoul's defense ministry has also asked Tokyo to stop distorting facts and not to use the incident for political reasons. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And Japan has reportedly asked South Korea to answer its request for talks on Seoul's forced labor ruling within a month. Last Wednesday, Tokyo requested such a meeting under the 1965 bilateral agreement that normalized ties between the two countries, following a Seoul court ruling last year for a Japanese firm to compensate South Koreans for the wartime atrocity. Today, a senior official at the nation's foreign ministry confirmed Tokyo asked for a reply within 30 days. Seoul said it will closely review the request, even considering the option of adding other agenda to the talks, including sexual enslavement of Korean women during World War II. The timeframe is seen as a move by Japan to take the case to the next stage, the International Court of Justice. Pyongyang and Washington are hashing out the details for their next summit. While nothing is confirmed yet, there are reports the two sides might meet next month in Vietnam. Park Hee-jun has more on when and where the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. may meet.
North Korea and the U.S. are apparently making considerable preparations for their second summits. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday that Washington is working out the details with Pyongyang. President Trump also previously said the two sides are negotiating on a location and that it will be announced in the not-too-distant future. There are reports indicating the venue is already being narrowed down to Vietnam. Vietnam has diplomatic relations with both countries and is within flying distance for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The Japanese daily Asahi Shimbun reports that Trump suggested to Kim that they meet in the third week of February in Vietnam. It also said officials from the two sides recently met in New York to discuss the summit, but were unable to reach a decision. Japan's Yomiuri Shimbun and Singapore-based The Straits Times also report that Vietnam is the favorite. But other locations, such as Bangkok, Hawaii, and the inter-Korean truce village of Panmunjom have also been suggested. The nuclearization talks between Pyongyang and Washington have stalled since Pompeo's trip to the north last October. But taking into account that Pompeo's tour of the Middle East ends on Tuesday, there's mounting speculation that high-level or working-level talks between the two sides could take place as early as this week to thrash out the logistics for the second summit. Watchers say that considering the Trump administration has said repeatedly that it wants to hold the summit early this year, the date and location should be announced soon. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
With the pace of inter-Korean cooperation picking up, there's growing interest from neighboring countries. One of them is Russia, which maintains friendly relations with both South and North Korea. Our Cha Sang-mi flew over to Vladivostock to hear about what the local analysts had to say about inter-Korean relations in 2019. Sang-mi, do tell us exactly where you are and do fill us in on how these experts view the future of our cross-border ties.
Daniel, I'm right now in Russia's far eastern city of Vladivostock, or more precisely at Eagle's Nest Mount. As you can see behind me, the skyline is very beautiful here. But to tell you more about Vladivostock, it's actually Russia's one of the most important port cities and also the departure point of the Trans-Siberian Railway. But to tell you, we have been here filming documentary to hear what Russian experts had to say about the inter-Korean ties in this year. But overall, the Russian public have been saying that they're very supportive about establishing lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula, and experts have been stressing that Russia can geopolitically serve as a key hub for both people and goods. The chief editor of Vladivostok's top economic newspaper says the city's residents were very critical before the recent peace drive. Among the two Koreas and Russia, experts cooperation on railways and priority. Take a listen.
When North Korea was conducting provocations near our Primorsky Krai, we evaluated Kim Jong-un's policy to be extremely negative. Russia wanted strict sanctions on the regime, but since the situation improved with peace talks, we started to like them. We just wish Kim carries on in this direction.
We need three-way projects for our countries. I'm talking about big projects using North Korea's and Russia's ports. For instance, the Najin project is a project that provides Russian coal via North Korea. Secondly, when it comes to the economy, I think South Korean firms can enter North Korean market through Russia. Now the North's market is starting to boom.
지금요? We actually just came back from Hasan, Russia's urban locality adjacent to the North Korean border, and saw those railways. Seoul and have been talking about Najin Hasan project for a long period of time, but it has been stalled because of the sanctions from the UN. But this is very important because if the Najin Hasan project is live, then the course between the two Koreas will actually serve as a new path of peace. This was Cha Sang-mi from Vladivostock, Russia.
President Moon Jae-in held a meeting with his top aides in the first such session of the year. One issue brought up during it was the recent allegations of sexual abuse and violence against female athletes. The South Korean leader urged his aides to do their utmost to eradicate all abuse in sports.
이유로 또는 국제 대회의 메달을 이유로 어떤 억압과 폭력도 정당화될 수 없다는 점을 다시 한번 강조하고 싶습니다.
There's been a series of claims by female athletes, including short track superstar and champion Shim Seok-hee, that they were sexually assaulted by their coaches. Moon asked his aides to create a safe environment in which all victims can come forward. Today's meeting was the first of its kind since the president replaced his chief of staff, his senior secretary for political affairs, and his senior secretary for public relations last Tuesday. He also called for better communication by his staff with the public, business, labor, government ministries, and the National Assembly. President Moon is meeting with top CEOs as part of his administration's efforts to breathe life into the economy. According to the nation's top office, the session in a town hall setting will bring together the country's most successful business leaders, including the heads of Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, SK, and LG Group, as well as the leaders of mid-sized companies for a frank discussion. A week ago, he also met with members of SMEs and venture firms. These talks were planned at the start of the year to try and boost consumption and local economy in general. A new report highlights the extent that Samsung Electronics has dominated sales figures in Korean firms over the past decade. It shows the tech titan strategy of enlarging the market is behind this success. Choi Si-young explains further.
For 17 years since 2002, Samsung Electronics has had the highest annual sales out of the top 1,000 publicly traded firms. And for the past 7 years, it has taken up roughly 10% of the combined annual sales volume of those 1,000 firms. This is according to the latest report on the tech giant by the Korea CXO Institute, a Korean business data analysis firm that surveys companies by sales and industry. The director of Korea CXO Institute attributes Samsung's achievement to its strategy of enlarging the market and sales rather than cutting down on cost. However, the future for the tech giant is not all that rosy. The firm's operating profits had been on the rise since 2016, but the latest figure in January shows they are starting to fall. Korean securities firms also forecast the firm's operating profits to be around $40 billion this year, down 24% from last year. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
Sales at local duty-free stores hit a record high in 2018. According to data from the Korea Duty Free Shops Association, at $17 billion, it's up nearly 35% from the year before. Industry analysts say it was thanks to Chinese nationals who buy duty-free products in Seoul to sell back home. And this was despite Beijing restricting some travel to South Korea because of Seoul's deployment of the U.S. missile defense system, THAAD. South Korea and China will hold trade talks in the nation's port city of Busan for 3 days starting Tuesday. According to the Trade Ministry, the session will focus on opening up the services sector and boosting bilateral investment, including strengthening protection for Korean investors in China. The ministry adds the talks are being held to reaffirm bilateral free trade deal amid rising trade uncertainties. It's estimated the export volume of Beijing's services sector is now the world's largest, reaching $15.6 billion in 2017. Minister Chung Kyung-do delivered a defense policy briefing to some 700 military officials from the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Speaking at Gyeongdae Military Headquarters, the defense chief explained the plans for the military's main tasks this year. He also touched on the details of the 5-year defense plan announced last Friday. Chung stressed the importance of maintaining a strong defense posture, building trust by implementing the Inter-Korean Military Agreement, and modernizing the nation's defense system with the ongoing Defense Reform 2.0. 2 South Korean naval vessels have arrived in Shanghai on the last stop of their training cruise. The ships are hosting events until Thursday to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the Korean provisional government, which was set up in Shanghai in 1919. Seoul's Navy will invite the descendants of the independence fighters and Korean residents in the area for an on-deck reception. The training task group began its voyage last September and will complete its mission on Saturday when it embarks for the South Korean port of Jinhae. The population growth rate for South Korea has been decreasing year after year, and with the number of elderly people still going up, the nation's average age is higher than ever before. Seo Bo-bin zooms in on this concerning trend.
As of end of last year, the average age of South Korea's 50 million residents exceeded 42 for the first time since such statistics were first published. According to the statistics released by the Ministry of Public Administration and Security, population growth fell to just 0.09%, marking the lowest percentage increase since annual population data was first published in 2008. The population growth rate had risen from 0.47% in 2009 to 1.47% in 2010, but since then it has been steadily decreasing, and in 2017 it hit 0.16% before dropping even further last year. Compared to 2017, the number of people in their 40s or younger decreased in 2018, while those in their 50s or older increased. The population aged 0 to 9 only accounted for 49.9% of those in their 50s, the first time it has dropped below 50%. Over 7 million people, or 15% of the total population, were aged 65 or older last year, which is an increase of 290,000 people from the previous year. Seo Bo-bin, Arirang News.
It's been 5 years since the Seoul sank and took more than 300 lives. Finally, the survivors of the worst maritime disaster in South Korea's history have won damages in a lawsuit against the state and the ferry operator. Kim Mo-kyun has the latest.
On Monday, the Ansan branch of the Suwon District Court held the state and the ferry operator Cheonghaejin Marine responsible for the tragedy in which the Seoul ferry capsized in 2014, killing more than 300 passengers, including many high school students who were on a field trip. The court ordered the ferry operator to pay compensation of some $71,000 to the 20 survivors of the tragedy. Family members of student survivors will receive up to $14,000, and relatives of other survivors will be compensated up to $29,000 depending on their relationship with the survivors. In Monday's ruling, the court acknowledged that the authorities and officials of Cheonghaejin Marine overlooked the rescue operations, and their actions caused severe mental suffering for the survivors. The court said that the belated escape from the sinking and the absence of directions from the crewmen caused the survivors considerable difficulties, with some of them even suffering from post-traumatic stress disorders. The ruling also held the state responsible for the situation for not providing accurate information about the search and rescue operations after the sinking, and for not giving the victims enough psychological and social support. The regional court's ruling on the survivors' lawsuit comes some 6 months after the court awarded the victims of the tragedy nearly $180,000 and the relatives up to $35,000 each in a separate suit. More than 200 family members lodged an appeal against that ruling, claiming that the state needs to take more responsibility for its negligence. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Many people past the age of 40 miss the yesteryears, their golden days remembered as fond memories. But in recent months, a growing number of young Koreans are eager to revive the 80s and 90s, even though they didn't directly experience those times. Oh Soo-young shows us how old school trends are making a comeback in food, fashion, and in lifestyle.
Tucked away in a small cafe in Seoul, young Koreans are revisiting the past in search of simplicity and authenticity. Away from the skyscrapers and the hustle and bustle of the city, this cafe is dimly lit with ornate lamps amid polished wooden frames, antique ornaments and vintage-style furniture. The cafe illustrates the so-called neutro trend, which has been gaining followers mostly in their teens and 20s, seeking out items and experiences reminiscent of the 1980s and 90s. Small rundown alleyways like these are no longer considered shabby. They're now the best places to scour for hidden gems from the past, such as vintage cafes, unique eateries and arcade game machines. The neutro trend has also trickled to the mainstream market. Designs from the 80s and 90s, with stark hues and simple fonts, have been revived on furniture, accessories and even food packaging, including the nation's all-time favourite snacks. Fashion brands have also infused the neutro theme in their collections, with runway highlights from 20 years ago. Some of the most popular items are street-style outerwear, including short puffer coats given a modern twist with fluffy fabrics. Duffel coats are also popular, as are flamboyant patterns and plaid.
Fashion and culture from the 80s to 90s have appealed to millennials as a new, refreshing look. So many brands are recreating iconic items that were popular in those decades. For instance, Samsung C&T's Junji just collaborated with British sports brand Umbro to reflect this trend through both street or casual pieces.
Experts say this throwback to the past isn't just superficial.
I think the younger generation are experiencing a keen job crisis these days, right? They feel that they have to give up some of the things like marriages and having children and having a house, something like that. So I think they need some rest and comfort to avoid the fatigue of the hyper-connected world where everything is connected through SNS.
Various industry experts say the neutro trend is likely to become one of the biggest lifestyle keywords of the year, as more and more people are searching for ways to detox from digitalization. Usuyang, Arirang News.
A unique art technique was added to South Korea's list of intangible cultural assets last week. Among other things, nakgwajang requires patience, precision, and tolerance to pain. Won Jung-hwan met up with the one and only master of the craft who devoted decades of his life to this art form.
The Cultural Heritage Administration has designated the art technique nakgwajang as Intangible Cultural Heritage number 136. The technique involves creating drawings or patterns using searing hot iron on materials such as paper, wood, and leather. This form of art originated in Jeollabuk-do province at around the start of the 19th century, and it has finally gained public recognition through the sole craft master in the country, Kim Young-jo. Kim, who has been practicing the skill since 1972, said he is proud that nakgwa, the name of the skill itself, has finally become a national cultural asset. When asked about why it is so special, Kim explained how his traditional iron art technique differs from the conventional modern technique which uses an electric iron.
Our traditional technique is pure. Basically, we make art by using iron that's been heated in charcoal. Yes, it can be said that it's somewhat inconvenient, since the heated iron can be used only for 30 seconds max, but there is a difference in the details of depth when using the traditional technique.
Nakgwajang requires skilled craftsmanship to use the iron tools to create light and dark shades. And the veteran craftmaster says that, as well as a lot of effort, it took a lot of pain to reach this level, with Kim truly suffering for his art.
When I first started, I burned my hand a lot. Even these days, when I'm so focused on crafting, I sometimes touch the hot iron without even knowing it.
By officially recognizing cultural heritage and the masters who keep these traditions alive, Korea can preserve its deep, rich culture and share it with the world. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
Turning to the world of sports now, one of the most entertaining golfers in the world has earned an invitation to showcase his moves to a global audience. South Korea's very own Choi Ho-sung, who became an internet sensation with his eccentric swing, will play in his first PGA Tour event early next month. ranked 198th in the world, and without a card to play on the big stage, he received a sponsor's exemption to take part in the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am event. Che's unique golfing style, which fans call the fisherman's swing, made him a social media sensation last year. Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the air pollution has reached its peak today, dare I say?
That's right, Daniel. Now, since 2015, Seoul was issued with an ultrafine dust warning for the first time. Now, toxic air so far was mainly built up by pollutants generated domestically, but smog from China worsened the situation this afternoon, and it will gradually dissipate starting tomorrow. Now, the highs will also remain low, especially in Seoul and its surrounding regions. Meanwhile, Tokyo's daytime high will be on the milder side. And kicking off the morning, Seoul will begin at -2 degrees Celsius and slightly higher as we move down south. And Seoul will rise up to 1 degree by the day, and Daegu and Gyeongju at 8 and 9 degrees respectively. Another cold snap will drop the mercury on Wednesday morning, though. Afterwards, we will have our continuous days of mild weather. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you in tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. As always, thanks for staying with us.